Hello, it's Alec from Airsoft Mutation, and today I will be showcasing how to epoxy your rack to your piston body. So for adhesives, you can use many different types of epoxies. I do not recommend cyanoacrylate glues because they don't fill in gaps well, and they're also very brittle. So they could crack and put crazy glue essentially inside your compression system. In terms of the epoxy used, you could use any type of non-brittle epoxy, but my personal favorite is CECorp C-Tough. This stuff is essentially JB Weld, but less brittle and much more shock absorbent. So there are three, or essentially four main areas you want to epoxy on this piston. The most important parts will be this front section here, the section where it curves into where the plastic gets thicker and the rack gets thinner, the back of the pickup support, and also on the top here. Those four areas are your key areas to epoxy. You don't need to epoxy in the track at all. It's not needed. If you want, you could use crazy glue there, only in the track, so that you get more bite along the rack, but you don't need to because the piston is strong enough without it. So we'll start with the tools needed. Honestly, all you really need is some very fine tipped tweezers like these guys. That allows you to put the epoxy exactly where you need it. So I'll just grab a bit. In terms of how much epoxy to put, in the front here you want a very, very, very fine amount. The reasoning being is if you put too much right here, you get the epoxy will ooze out and it'll go in your little bearing slot here, and it'll prevent your bearings from rotating properly. So you just want a small little bit. It's actually a bit too much here. Then you want them in the cracks like here. Some on the top to fill in that gap. And then your pickup tooth support. If you're having trouble placing it there, I just realized it is easier to just place it on the rack because it's more open and less cramped. So if you have a bigger tool that can't get into small areas, just put some on the rack itself. Now, once you have these two guys ready, you just slide them in. This rack is somewhat not loose, but it's not extremely tight. Some bodies will be ridiculously tight, so don't be afraid to push them in with a lot of force. Just make sure you do not clip that edge, because you can then break the piston, kind of like I did here. So you're going to want to push this in, and when you get towards the end, you want to find a very hard flat surface like a vise or like a wood table, and push down very hard like this. This will make it so that your rack is flat to the piston face here, the piston head face. So I'll just do that. All right, push it down. You'll get maybe a bit of epoxy. Just wipe that down, and then that's pretty much it. You just got to do a final little cleanup. I use these little precision Q-tips. They really help in getting in between the cracks. So I'll just scoop up that epoxy. You'll get some excess on the top here, and you'll also get some excess in this little crack here. that should be it for the piston rack installation.